Hey there, Simon here from AQ Outdoors, just checking in from CB Dam on the Kananaskis River with another edition of our online whitewater kayaking education series. Today we're going to be looking at an advanced version of the sweep stroke, which in our progression we use to build a foundation for the power position, which is a reference point for our paddlers, but also to give people tools to actually use body rotation, which is a very, very important piece of intermediate and advanced kayaking. So just for some context, we're going to approach this video a little differently than some of the others we've done, in the sense that we're going to look at it through the lens of the person learning this more advanced sweep stroke, but also how we break it down and teach it in small components and build to the final complete stroke. So the prerequisites for this lesson to get the most out of it is that you're comfortable in a whitewater kayak, you've probably paddled a bit of class 1 and a bit of class 2, and you have the ability to perform an effective sweep stroke. As far as ideal learning locations go for this session, we just want to find a nice sheltered piece of flat water that's out of the wind and is not affected by the current, and that's going to give us the best chance of success. The people we teach this advanced sweep stroke to tend to be those who are advancing in their whitewater paddling, and they come to us with a functioning sweep stroke in the sense that they can comfortably turn their boat. However, they often lack some of the technical components that encourage body rotation and dynamic whitewater paddling. In a nutshell, this is not simply about the sweep stroke. It's about building a foundation for body rotation, which extends to boat control, forward paddling, boofing, and everything in between. So if you're an instructor watching this video, I just want you to focus in on the layered granular progression that we're using. If you're a learner, I just want you to look at the steps and play along. So I'm just going to start out here demoing this, and you'll probably see some subtle differences to what you're doing right now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into all the little layers of the sweep stroke to build it to where we want to get it to. So the first thing that I'm going to start with is a quiet blade. It's quite often people are splashing. We want the whole blade in the water and silent because that's the most effective way to utilize our paddle. You'll notice there's very little disturbance of the water and very little sound. This means we're getting the maximum efficiency out of each stroke. So that's step one. The second step is something that will probably bring up some discussion, which is great. A lot of people teach a sweep stroke from the toes to the stern. When we're doing this with more advanced paddlers, we kind of take out some of that stern piece because it's largely using the arms, not upper body rotation, which is a big piece of this skill set. So there's a little drill that we get paddlers to do, and it just looks like this. We essentially get your hands at shoulder width apart and tuck your elbows into your ribs, okay? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate until my body doesn't rotate anymore. So I can keep my hands in alignment, and then at some point, my hands start to shift, and that's where my rotation finishes. So here what I'm going to do is go back to that spot where my rotation ends and reference it on the deck of my boat. So my body rotation finishes about here. So now we're going to take the first step, which was silent, and now we're just going to reduce the length of that stroke a little bit. All right, so it's going to look something like this. Okay, so that just feels like we've taken something away, but really what we're doing there is we're making sure that we're using trunk rotation to do the stroke rather than using our arms to pull in at the end, which can be a pretty unstable spot to be. Now, in full transparency, if I don't have total control of my boat in whitewater, I am going to use that back part a little bit, but for now we're looking at the gold standard. Okay, so now step 3 is a subtle one. What we're going to do is we're going to make sure that at the beginning of the stroke, we turn our knuckles forwards a little bit because we want that paddle to go in 90 degrees to the water. If our wrists are turned over a little bit, more like a forward stroke, we tend to fan a little bit of that power off it. Again, we're getting pretty granular here, but we're looking at gold standard. So here we go, we're going to go forwards. This allows us to build pressure on the blade as soon as the stroke starts. you'll probably find that this is a noticeable difference from what you're doing right now. So the next one is also something that may change how you think about the sweep stroke itself. So what we want to do with a sweep stroke is create space between the boat and the blade. People tend to think of the sweep stroke as a pull motion. I actually like to think of it as a push and creating separation between the boat and the blade. So I'm going to try and highlight that right now. So as I plant the blade, I'm extending out and away and creating that space, which allows us to build more pressure on the blade and in turn spin the boat more effectively. That pressure on the blade is critical in all of the advanced strokes, whether it's forward paddling, boat control, boofing. That pressure is stability, and stability equals control. The next layer we're going to talk about is the release of the paddle, which probably looks a bit different than what you're used to. I'll explain it as I go along. So I'm finishing with the paddle kind of at eye level, more or less, and I'm maintaining the rotation as I finish it and let the boat spin. I can feel that my upper and lower body are separated, and I can feel that there's power built in there. So now we're going to start diving into more of the body rotation or the upper and lower body separation and focusing a little less on the stroke. So what people tend to do to lengthen a stroke in a kayak is lean forwards like this, which doesn't allow us to rotate very well. So what we're going to do here in this next step is pull our back shoulder back to create more reach, and then we unwind from there. It looks a little robotic at this point, and you'll give it your own flair. But this is kind of how we build the foundations to make sure that they're easy to remember. So I'm winding up, planting, unwinding. So just to highlight that above water, this is kind of the motion. We have soft bends in our elbows, pull that top shoulder back, push the front hand forwards, and then watch my arms. They don't really pull. I just rotate with my body through it. Now, when you're watching this and I add it to the blade being in the water, hopefully you can see that the arm is not doing much of the work. It's actually the torso rotation. And this is why we shorten the stroke, because that is where my body rotation finishes. So next, we're going to build on that just a little bit more, and we're going to focus on our top hand, so the paddle that isn't holding onto the blade that's in the water. We want to think about that. Imagine you're reading a wristwatch. So we want to keep that top hand high. It allows us to rotate, it keeps us stable, and allows us to build a ton of pressure on the blade, which equals power, stability, and control. Right, so you'll watch my top hand here is going to stay pretty high the whole time. At the same time, you should be able to see that upper and lower body separation, that body rotation, and that top hand stays high. So the next thing we're going to bounce into is the power position, which is really how we start the sweep stroke, but it's also the foundation for forward paddling, boofing, and a whole bunch of other skills. So above water, when we look at it, it's going to look something like this. And this is a great place to start. It's just to practice without the blade being engaged in the water. We want to be balanced on edge and fully rotated. So here, from a feel standpoint, what I'm doing is I'm making sure that top hand stays high. I'm sucking my back shoulder back, and I'm engaging that same knee to put the boat on edge, slightly forward of center, and just ready to engage that stroke. I can also think about trying to get my shoulders, to really exaggerate it, get my shoulders and head almost looking up to the sky. And you'll feel all the pressure points. All those pressure points is just power building for when you unwind. Now I'm just going to do it with my paddle in the water, okay? So it'll look something like this. So I promised earlier to tell you why we're releasing our hands up at eye level. So when you look at this, once we release it, it actually puts us in the power position on the other side, which allows us to be really proactive in our paddling. Quite often people talk about proactive paddling as like paddle, paddle, paddle. You've always got to have your blade in the water, but you watch the best in the world and that's rarely the case. They're always planning and timing their next stroke, right? So when I do this, I release, all of a sudden, I'm ready in the power position proactively on the other side. If I need a stroke on the other side, it's a very quick counter rotation, and that puts me back in the spot I need to be, ready to unwind, build pressure on the blade, and in turn power. So now with that, we're going to add that into our sweep stroke. And I want you to watch the stern of the boat, because this is going to lead on to the next teaching point. Just make a note to yourself what happens to the stern. I'm sure you'll notice that quite a lot of water went up and over the stern there, okay? So the reason that we put the boat on edge is so that we can wind up more and get more reach on the stroke. But what that means is once we initiate the stroke, we need to flatten the boat out at the same time. So basically, I'm using the opposite knee to flatten the boat as I do the stroke. So I'll demonstrate it and then I'll explain it a bit. And we can see that the stern of the boat, even in this half slice, is clearing the water right off the bat. So basically in that situation where I'm doing the sweep on my right, when I'm in the power position, all my pressure is on my left knee. Then when I do the sweep, I'm just gently lifting my right knee to flatten the boat. Then I go back up on edge again, pull up on that right knee and flatten the kayak. So this here now is the final step really to bring this all together. And so this is where we try and really magnify the body rotation because we can still be kind of using our arms here. What I want you to think about when you're practicing this and you're getting to these final steps is we think about planting the paddle and the boat moving away from the blade rather than the blade moving away from the boat. So this is a really subtle distinction, but a very important one. Okay, so the first sweep stroke here is a throwaway. You do need a little bit of momentum in flat water for this to work and feel right. In the current, it does the work for you, so you don't need that throwaway stroke. So we'll ignore the first one here, and then I'm gonna really highlight just planting the blade and driving my feet and knees away from the blade. So I'm on edge, I plant, and I'm pushing my right knee and my feet away from the blade at the same time. So plant, drive away. And if you look at my upper body, what that does is it forces the upper and lower body separation, which is body rotation essentially. So rotate, plant, push the blade away a little bit and drive with the knee. If I do it right, I can actually do this very easily just with one hand. And I can feel pressure on the blade, and when I feel that pressure, I'm pushing my knee and my feet away from the blade. So that's all of the key steps. There's obviously a lot in there, and we didn't talk about where to look and a bunch of other things. However, we'll let you play around with that yourself because there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer in that regard. So just to loosely summarize things here, we've kind of introduced two things. We've introduced this advanced sweep, which is encouraging body rotation and building power on the blade. But we've also introduced this concept of the power position, which for us in our teaching and our personal paddling acts as a reference for all of the key main advanced strokes. So we've got our control stroke for a sweep. We can start here for our forward stroke, and then we can also use that to boof. So we're going to do a little recap of all the steps that we just went through. But what I want you to do is just pause the video for just a moment and see how many of them you can remember yourself. It's unlikely you'll remember them all, and that's fine. What we find is certain steps resonate with certain people, and if they are the things that you're focused on, that's great. They're going to help you improve your paddling, control, and body rotation. I mentioned earlier in the video that people we teach this to come with functional sweep strokes, but not necessarily effective ones. Some of the components that we see that aren't entirely effective at the beginning are splashy strokes, no body rotation. So just all in the arms. Works fine on flat water, but not so great in whitewater. The stern catching and holding water, which leads to instability, low hands, which doesn't allow us to rotate nearly as much, and it also doesn't build nearly as much power on the blade and is quite unstable in whitewater, amongst lots of others. Thanks so much for checking out our advanced sweep stroke and body rotation tutorial. We hope you found a load of value in it. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment section below and we'll be certain to reply to you. Also, if you liked the video, we'd be really stoked if you subscribe to our channel. For more information, you can check us out at aqoutdoors.com.